The planets have aligned, and once again, the prophecy has come true. That's right, folks. It's time for another episode of the Roundtable Rethink podcast with me, your trusty host, Uncle Paddy, joined every week by twin brother and spare parts bin, Andy, the asshole.
Woo! Come on now.
And not even the surgeon's knife can keep him away this week. He's back with one hand bandaged, but raring to go. The sage himself, Stevie Tel Avivi.
Now known as Frankenhand.
This week, we will be discussing the current state of AI self-driving technology. We're going to be talking about who are the winners, who are the losers, and where will we see it emerge first. Remember DeepSeek? They're back with an incredible new model that just dropped in the last few hours, DeepSeek version 3.2. It's got extremely novel and rare characteristics. Andy the asshole will be unpacking that. And then finally, we're going to bring you a critical update on the UK energy sector and why we have some of the highest energy prices in the entire Western world. A very timely update on the back of what was probably most would describe as the most unpopular budget
in recorded history.
In living memory.
Yes.
So a packed docket this week. Guys, we'll start the podcast the way that we always start it before we get into the docket. Stephen, you're probably the best guy to lead us on.
How was your week?
How's your week been?
Well, after a 2-year wait, finally got under the surgeon's knife. And again, we love our national health system. At all the important points of your life, they are fabulous. But at some of the other intersections, not so good. So big shout out to the surgeon. Great. Big shout out to local surgery who did some stuff. But just little things like, please tell me at the end of the operation what to do next.
Yeah.
They send you home and no one can tell you, move the finger, don't move the finger. But anyway, long story short, hand is healing. It doesn't look very pretty, but stitches
No,
come
it
out
looks
this
like
week.
Stevie Wonder did the stitch job, and it looks like before he did the stitch job, you were protecting yourself from a machete attack
Freddy
only
Krueger
by the
attack.
palm of your hand.
Yeah, as I say, Frankenhand kind of sums it up.
Yeah, okay, very good. Andy, how's your week been?
Very busy. So we've just come off the back of a very successful Black Friday sale for the business. So banged in a brilliant number. It was a big run up to that. So, I mean, it's all kind of boring work stuff, but yeah, just feeling relieved to get another good month in the book, another successful Black Friday behind us. And now just draw breath, feel good about it for 2 minutes before we pivot into the festive season.
Which is always the way in sales. You're only as good as your
The last thing you
month's number.
killed.
Yeah.
What about you, bro?
Well, for me, it's been a pretty busy week. Despite the fact that, a lot of the clients I deal with are based in the States and they were off for Thanksgiving this week, it was still a pretty packed week with different things going on in the world of AI. I mean, so much changed since we recorded the podcast last week. I remember us finishing up on stories like Gemini 3 Pro and how it had crushed all the benchmarks, and then texting you guys while you were in the car
Driving
on the
home.
way home from the cyber cave going, fuck, Claude just dropped Opus 4.5
Yeah.
and it's now crushed everybody else.
And I'm just
So-
about to unpack DeepSeek, yeah.
I know. So it's an incredible amount of work trying to keep up on top of this stuff. And so I spent a lot of this week trying to keep on top of it. I thought I would kick us off with, a bit of a palate cleanser, trying to get away from the
Models.
I think important, but, not particularly interesting for the normies who listen to the show. Just all the stats and benchmarks about models, although ironically we will cover some of that today.
But in a slightly different way tonight.
Aye, but get us back to stories that some people can connect with. So we know that one of the great promises of AI is self-driving, okay? Cars that drive themselves. And the two best examples that people can connect to would be the Tesla self-driving capability, FSD, full self-driving, and then Google's Waymo Johnny cars that fly around about San Francisco and Austin and a few other cities in America. Two completely different approaches, to be honest, operating at completely different scale. So on the back of this epic year of AI, where we've seen just unbelievable progress across a variety of different fields, I'm hoping that we'll actually unpack our predictions from last
January.
year next week.
Yeah.
So we're not going to have to figure out a docket next week, right? That's going to be the unpack show.
We're just going to review our
We'll
predictions
review
from
our predictions
January.
from last week.
Yeah.
I was just thinking what an unbelievably epic year of progress it's been, and we will expand on this next week properly. But it's been incredible by any measure, right?
I love the old expression. It's been so fast, and it will never be so slow again.
And never be so slow again. Nothing truer. We thought it was going to be a boring end to the year, and it's just been non-freaking stop for the last 2 or 3 weeks. So anyway, I wanted to revisit and reacquaint myself with how much has self-driving improved in that period of time. Are we starting to see these network effects where the data coming back in from the actual act of self-driving is now becoming this reinforcing flywheel that speeds up the progress? Spoiler alert, it would appear that that's happening. And just who the two key players are and how their approach differentiates from each other. So, very helpfully, in order to assist me with this, Tesla have launched a dashboard or think about it as a kind of supervised safety digest page on their website. And so what this does is it shows you in real time. So obviously it's an audio podcast, so you don't see what I'm seeing, but there's a ticker on the screen showing how many full self-driving miles have been driven. And right now, that ticker is at 6.63 billion miles driven, billion with a B.
And see, before you go any further on that, can we just level set on quantum for a wee second? 1 million seconds ago was 11 days ago. 1 billion seconds ago was 33 years ago. And 1 trillion seconds ago was 32,000 years ago.
Yeah.
Where primitive man was running away all day from saber-toothed tiger and clubbing woolly mammoths to death to eat every day. We say them, they all slip
the
off the
billions
tongue.
and the millions and the
they all
trillions
sound
roll
very
out.
similar, but they cannot even show up in the same universe as measured by their actual quantum.
But the craziest thing about the number is when I'm looking at the ticker here, and I've actually stopwatched this, the number's growing by about 1,000 miles every 6 seconds.
Going up the only thing going up faster is America's national debt.
It actually looks like one of those national debt counters.
Yeah. It's like blazing past the screen. It's growing by about 1,000 miles every 6 seconds. So 1,000 new self-driving miles being reported back, 1,000 new miles of data to train the AI model on every 6 seconds. So the numbers are really quite staggering. So I wanted to talk about what the safety implications of this are so far in the data that's been reported. So there's two kind of metrics that key regulators around the world are tracking in order to green light full self-driving in that territory. So the first metric is miles driven before a major collision and miles driven before a minor collision. So if you are in a Tesla and you have full self-driving enabled, you will drive about 5.1 million miles before you have a major collision. If you're an average American driver, you will drive 699,000 miles before you have a major collision.
And if you're Andrew Donnelly, a week post-driving test, you will drive 47
You
miles.
will run your
before.
Ford Escort into the pillar that holds up the local petrol station.
That's
and split
covered.
it right down the middle.
That was covered in hazard tape.
So you're talking
basically
about
you're
a
talking
9x
9x,
delta between a normal driver and how safe a driver is with FSD turned on. If you look at minor collisions, the data is very similar. So you'll drive about 1,000,005 miles before you'll have a minor collision. And if you're a normal driver, that will happen to you in about 229,000 miles. So the data is now very compelling. It's starting to pile up now that this is very, very safe technology.
And I take it that's one of the reasons that they've now been greenlit in places like Austin, Texas.
Exactly.
And just to be clear, when you talk about full FSD being turned on, this is with no intervention from the
Safety driver.
no intervention from a human.
Safety. So we'll go on to talk about that. Safety drivers are a tiny part. So safety drivers are only in Austin on a very, very small fleet of vehicles. If I asked you today how many Tesla customers pay for full self-driving, how would you answer that question? What do you think the number would be?
500,000.
Stephen? Over, under?
Over.
Right. It's about 800,000. So, and they've never actually said that number, but we can get to it through other things they've said. So Elon has previously reported that about 12% of the fleet, 12% of the active fleet pay for full self-driving. Yeah. The active fleet's about 9 million cars. Okay. So it's about 800,000, somewhere between 800,000 and a million customers of FSD.
And only really the guys with hardware 4 are running a version that's properly useful.
Coming on to talk about that as well. So in the Tesla environment, that's approximately 80 to 90 million self-driving miles per week being recorded. New self-driving miles for the AI algorithm to train on, which again is a enormous data advantage compared to others, and we'll contrast some of their numbers in a second. That's about 11 to 12 million miles per day. So if you want to put that into a comparison against Waymo, it's about 40 times more self-driving miles than the current Waymo system is capable of producing. Okay, and this speaks to a completely fundamental difference in the approach to solving this problem. As everybody knows, Tesla's approach is photons in, controls out, neural net in the middle, AI all the way down. Google's approach is more complex, requires on a large sensor suite, a LiDAR, radar, cameras, all that data comes together into neural nets, controls out, okay? And it's all very expensive.
Plus equipment. A huge city mapping project as well.
Plus HD maps and all the other stuff that have to go ahead of the vehicle rollout program.
Basically, to keep it nice and simple, Tesla works on almost the same principle as what we can see driving, enhanced with more cameras. But beyond that, it's just cameras.
It synthesizes human driving. So you take information in through your photons in through your eyeballs, run it through your brain, and controls out in the car. It's a synthetic version of that.
So the advantage that Tesla's compounding here is becoming ridiculous, and that's why fundamentally they are the guys who will win this. And honestly, there's nobody really anywhere near. Just in the same way that SpaceX have almost a monopoly on space, you could argue that it's pretty clear that Tesla will have an almost monopoly on self-driving, because it's Waymo being the next closest competitor in terms of capability, and then the next guy behind Waymo being in the dust, basically. So there's only really 2 games in town right now. And Tesla has such a data advantage, it's hard to imagine how anybody else catches up, because nobody else has got the fleet that can produce the data that can then train the model and spit out a better version of the FSD capability. So the data advantage here is incredible. So you go from 85 million miles Tesla, 2 million miles Waymo. You go 12 million miles a day to 285,000 miles a day. And you go from 1.5 million active FSD users, that's another reported number, to 2,500 Waymos.
Yeah.
And that 1.5 million could become 2.5 million based on a promotion they might run next week where they just give everybody FSD free for 90 days. So they can get they're already operating at very big numbers. They can get those numbers to be double, triple, quadruple what they are right now with the right kind of set of commercial incentives.
And I think it's important to mention, to frame this properly, that in terms of just to really rail home Tesla's advantage here, Waymo were at this long before Tesla were. Yeah, like Waymo had a 5-6 year jump on. Yeah.
I'm sure you're going to come on to it. But the real question in my mind is then, what holds up adoption? What's stopping them hitting the streets?
Regulation.
That's it.
So at the moment, Tesla's running what they call version 14 of the software. 14.2 to be precise is the most recent version of the FSD software that's running. But it's only available on hardware 4 cars. And this is a really important point. So if you're a schmuck like me and you brought your Tesla, or your wife bought her Tesla in the middle of 2023, you were the very last of the hardware 3 cars, okay? And right now, hardware 3 cannot run the most sophisticated version of the full self-driving stack. Only available in hardware 4. Hardware 4 became available late in 23, and it is the current production level of hardware.
So that covers Model 3 Highland and Model Y Juniper.
Cybertruck and soon to be Cybercab.
Yeah.
Okay. Will all run on hardware 4. Tesla don't have the hardware 5 chip coming out to sometime in 27. So hardware 4 is it, and we'll probably exhaust the limitations of hardware 4 as we continue to improve the model over the next 12 to 18 months. Now, they don't need a better chip to get to full autonomous self-driving. They already feel like they're kind of there. And 14.3, they're calling that the missing piece of the puzzle, and it's coming out imminently within days or weeks. Okay, and 14.3 fills in some of the edge cases and the capability that really make it just over the top. Okay, so 14.3 is expected in early 2026. It's called the final puzzle piece for unsupervised driving, and it's expected to introduce the ability for the car to do things like reverse autonomously in complex scenarios. So the car's very good at going forward and navigating very complex landscapes and dealing with a lot of unpredictability. Not so great at doing that going backwards. So 14.3 is going to solve things like that. And then as we look out into late 26, they're talking about a version 15 that would be able to still run on the current generation of hardware that's going to be available to them for the next 18 months. Now, where does that leave all the hardware 3 guys like me? So the truth is, today, we are still running version 12 of the full self-driving stack, which is significantly behind current state-of-the-art. Through compressing the state-of-the-art and through quantizing the models and shrinking them, they're hoping to get some version of the capability they have today to the hardware 3 guys, but it's pretty clear we're probably 6 to 12 months behind anybody running the most recent hardware. So
hardware 4 is the only game in town. Yeah.
Hardware 4 is the only game in town. So Tesla just totally out there in front. Waymo will continue to improve their models. Waymo will continue to improve their capability, but fundamentally will be constrained by A, capital. They're a much smaller business than Tesla. And secondly, it's a much more complex rollout of partnerships on vehicles, partnerships on sensor suites and hardware, teams that have to go ahead and do HD maps. So I think fundamentally over the next 12 months, you're going to see the gap between the two widen significantly, as Tesla now has millions and millions and millions of customers for this ever-improving capability that it's got today. Any questions?
So as far as I understand what you're saying, the only thing that now stops Tesla having full self-driving across the whole of the United States is regulation.
Regulatory.
Yeah.
Insurances shouldn't be. In fact, if anything, the argument's going to now be the insurers will want you to be full self-driving because it'll actually reduce the risk of collisions.
Well, there's nuance to that as well. I mean, they're proceeding with an abundance of caution because remember, a lot of those self-driving miles take place in 4 or 5 major cities. So a lot of the big California cities are where a lot of the concentration of those miles are, right?
Yeah.
So easy for them to launch in California, maybe not as easy for them to launch in Arkansas or somewhere.
I know, but the regulatory approval in the States, at least, is coming thick and fast.
Yeah.
There's new cities and new territories coming online by the day or by the week.
Yeah.
Very different story in Europe. So we are lagging behind massively,
Surprise, surprise.
as Europe always does,
Yeah.
in its ability to regulate and its ability to roll out very innovative programs like this. So I'll tell you what the current landscape is from a European.
Let me just ask you one question before we move on. So again, just want to understand the financial model. So in America, we've got billions of miles being driven. Do we have any idea of is it Tesla using Tesla's own car, i.e. they are the owners and the providers, or are third parties starting to operate them yet? Does Tesla make any money from actually running their own taxis?
This is all owner-operator stuff at the moment. They're currently not running any paid taxi service using these cars. But we know, of course, through the Cybercab that is the plan.
They're running robo-taxi.
They're doing it in Austin in a very small scale, controlled environment, and not looking to make any money of that right now, at least. And don't forget, it costs like $8,000 to get Tesla full self-driving as well.
Right.
So that's the only thing blunting the adoption. That's why you don't have 5 million Tesla owners with FSD rather than 1 million. It's just
a
the
fraction
$8,000
of what Waymo's would cost because they're into the tens of thousands of dollars for their suite of systems.
Yeah, but
their
Waymo's
car
not trying to
costs-
sell you a car.
Yeah, they're just trying to sell a
Waymo's just
system.
trying to sell you a ride. And so they are a taxi company and they are a taxi service and they're just trying to sell you a ride.
And Tesla's got options here, right? If they really want to just absolutely juice adoption, they can say, right, for the next 30 days, everybody that toggles on FSD gets a 50% reduction in it. You get it for $4,000 or $2,000 or £1,000. They can almost just adoption depending on how much they drop the price of it.
And Tesla's capable of producing 2.5, 3 million cars a year. So every new car that's produced is also another candidate for FSD. And who knows, maybe it just comes as standard with new cars and they find some way to square it. What Tesla have never had any trouble doing in the past is coming up with a better way of doing things, knowing that it completely screws the other guys who went early.
Yeah.
And then just going, sorry about that, guys. We'll figure out a way to make it right down the line. And that's what they're telling Hardware 3 owners right now. They're basically saying, if we discover that we can't get you to full self-driving without moving you to Hardware 4, we don't know how we're going to do it, but we will retrofit your car to Hardware 4. We've not figured out how we would do it, but we will eat the cost of that and we'll make that happen. So that's currently what they're saying. So as we look forward to international expansion, 26 should be a massive year for them. So they're actually looking to be fully regulatory approved in mainland China in February or March of next year. So Q1 of 26, which would be a massive deal because a lot of Tesla sales come from China.
Yep.
Ironically, and I could never have predicted this, the first European country to go is predicted to be the Dutch regulators sometime again in the February-March timeframe. And then there's this weird kind of quirk with European regulations where if you do it with one country, it's automatic in all the other countries. Guess who's coming up the rear and will be the last country to regulate and approve full self-driving?
The UK.
Coming up the rear, it must be Stammer.
Correct. So we're not even tabled to look at this until late 2026 and have already created new legislation to make this even more difficult than it would otherwise would be, called the Automated Vehicles Act.
That requires a new 1,000-person Quango to review everything about it.
But you know what it requires? It requires the owner, in this case Tesla, to take full legal responsibility and liability for the vehicle while FSD is engaged. And I don't know how Tesla's going to be able to agree to those terms. So that's the way that they've figured out the liability side of this. If I'm driving the car and I smash into an ice cream truck, then it's on me. I've got to pay for it. But if the car smashes in while on full self-driving, Tesla is liable for that interaction and for that accident and will have to pay any of the associated fees and costs. And I don't know how they could sign up for that at scale.
That negates the need for insurance. I mean, again, it's that whole thing. That's why you have insurance. That's why you run these numbers. And
it sounded like bullshit to me, Stephen. And then I spent a ridiculous amount of time and time I'll never get back reading up on the Automated Vehicle Act this afternoon. And it's all about liability. It's almost 90% about liability.
But again, this is where we'll talk about this bit later on, but where government here is so caught up in process rather than result. But product liability is product liability. If you build a bad product and it's got faults, there is a right of action. That's different from the cause of an accident, which would be an insurable risk. Now, there are obviously legal issues around there, but you're absolutely right. If you leave all liability with the producer, well, why bother producing?
Yeah, and that's how the Automated Vehicles Act is written, and that's what we're trying to convince guys like Tesla to sign up to, and I don't see how they ever could. So God knows when we'll see this stuff in the UK, but it looks like it might come to the Dutch community sometime in Q1 next year.
On the Dutch.
So that's everything I had on self-driving. It's a reality. 6.6 billion miles so far this year from one provider, billions from another provider. It's all happening. It's no future state. It's here. It's a solved technological problem. It's now just a regulatory issue with the rollout.
But the war cry to all UK Tesla owners is don't pay for FSD here in the UK because you can't use it.
No, or even the enhanced autopilot, which is garbage because we have regulations about how much a steering wheel can turn that is not assisted by a person. And so if the bend is too tight or too narrow, the enhanced autopilot will just bug out of that whole interaction and hand it back to you, the driver. And again, it's not because the capability sucks. And that's what most people say. They go, I paid $2,000 for the enhanced autopilot rather than the FSD because it's like a half step and it's supposed to take bends and do this. It can't do any of it because it's fucking kneecapped with a whole bunch of bullshit regulations because we can do nothing in this godforsaken fucking country.
And Stephen will tell us just how little we can do, particularly when it comes to energy, later on the Roundtable Rethink podcast.
All right, so there you go. Andy, tell us all about DeepSeek.
Late this afternoon, as I was preparing another story for the Roundtable Rethink podcast, I checked my X feed to find out that DeepSeek had just launched their brand new model architecture, DeepSeek V3.2. They always have these fabulously elegant names.
Somebody needs to do something about these names. They're all ridiculous.
Point releases. So I was having a look at it and I was doing a bit of digging on it, and you know we do cover all the main kind of new model releases on here, and the TLDR on them is a bit better, a bit faster, multimodal, but they're all kind of much of a muchness. So I thought this was going to be the same, and I thought I would give it a swerve. But the more I dug into it, the more I realised that there is novel innovations happening here that are way out with the norm and will probably set a new paradigm for model makers to follow in the future. So I want to cover off what a few of them are, the 4 or 5 big main innovations, and then I just want to kind of close out the conversation with just some thoughts to take away about where all this is headed. So DeepSeek introduced V3.2 in 2 different variants. So it's a 680 billion parameter model, so relatively small compared to the hulking great Gemini 3.0s and ChatGPT 5.1s. And one of the incredible new things they've came up with is what they refer to as sparse attention architecture.
Wow.
I know.
Sounds
And
really
that's a
boring.
very fancy way of saying that instead of looking at every single token, it focuses only on the most important ones, disregards the rest, and it can do that intuitively. And because it can do that, it can handle very long context queries of up to 130,000 tokens at a gigantic reduction in compute cost. Okay. Now, that is actually a huge deal in this world because, as we all know, the biggest constraint that we have just now on launching new models and us all getting access to AGI in the future is compute. So model efficiency is actually a huge deal moving forward. And so they've built a way to run very complex long context inquiries at a huge reduction in compute costs. So that is a truly novel innovation that they've come up with. They've built another version of the model called the Special. And this version of the model was specifically designed to run complex agentic workflows. And so,
just explain what a complex agentic workflow is for people.
A workflow where the model needs to plan, think, call tools, think, maintain coherence and context to achieve an outcome at the end of that.
All the things you'd expect a good personal assistant to do.
Yes. So the way that it's able to do that is one of the things that they did is they removed all the gating and all the penalties for thinking. So they allow it to run these incredibly long chains of thought at no penalty. And just as Paddy and I alluded to in a couple of shows ago, it turns out even if you've got a model that's maybe 10 IQ points behind the frontier, if you just let it run for longer and there's no time limitations, take as long as you need to come up with the best possible answer, you get results at the absolute bleeding edge of the frontier. So that's one of the things that they've done with this model, specifically for running complicated agentic tasks. They've taken away all the think penalties for it. It's allowed to run as long as it needs to complete the task. The third thing that they did, the third big innovation that they did was in post-training and reinforcement learning. So they built over 1,800 different environments so that the model could learn to use tools and handle complex tasks step by step. So every good analogy can be traced back to the Matrix. So when Morpheus was trying to teach Neo how to be world-class at Kung Fu, he created a synthetic dojo with all the things and the people inside it to help Neo become world-class at Kung Fu. The engineers at DeepSeek have done the exact same thing with the model. They've created these 1,800 synthetic environments to allow the model to know how to be a great chatbot, how to be a great agent, how to be a great tool call expert. And then
but in specific domains.
In specific domains, yeah.
So we were using an example earlier, right? So again, I'm just trying to bring this to life for people. So imagine the role of the SDR, the sales development rep, the person who does like cold outreach inside a business. So what do you need to be a good SDR? What do you need to do that task of being an SDR? Well, you need access to the customer's record in Salesforce to get their contact information and figure out if we've contacted them before. You need a tool to be able to get all their up-to-date information like LinkedIn or Zoom Info. Then you need another tool to be able to reach out to them like an email account or some other kind of DM execution tool. And so if you just take that, and then you need to be able to write compelling copy that has all the context of the past interactions to compel them to get in touch.
Yeah.
So if you took all the things and built a reinforcement learning environment that trained on all those interactions and then codified that into an SDR agent, multiplied by 1,800 other scenarios like that, that's what we mean when we say reinforcement learning environments.
Yeah.
We take a task in the economy, like a sales development rep. We synthetically recreate all the conditions that rep needs to be successful.
Yeah.
And then we have an AI do it.
Yeah. You take the person out of the loop, you just go and say, go and get me 27 new leads in that industry.
This is what a great search agent looks like, coding agent, general task agent, and you let it train on that. The other thing that they did was they created 85,000 complex prompts crafted to train it on multi-step workflows. So it's got a huge database of proprietary prompts that assists it to help it with these super complex planning tasks and execution tasks.
And you're getting advantage of that just out of the gate. You don't have to think about that stuff. So again, what does that mean? Well, before you reach out to the customer, you need to know if they've got any history with the company. And so there's a sequence to these steps. That's one of the things the prompt will be guiding on, right? So never reach out to a customer without checking that we've got any past interactions. That would be an example of one of thousands or tens of thousands of these prompts that would help sequence these workflows in a very
it's what we've
specific
talked about
way.
before. Effectively, what you're finding now is so much of the understanding is being bleached out. The process is all coming already baked in.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. These were things you would have to have hand coded before, and now they're getting all abstracted away into the kind of core capabilities of these new models.
And so only got a couple more to go. But the other thing that they added in was a cold start phase so that it's able to maintain coherence as it's tool calling. It's able to continue thinking as it's invoking tools. So I'll give you an example. Most legacy models can go ahead and tool call a weather app for you, right? So they'll tool call the weather app, but then they'll forget why they tool called the weather app. This is able to maintain its thinking while it's calling the app. So it doesn't just know that it needs to call the app, it knows why it's calling the app. So the context is important. So the example would be, okay, I'm calling the weather app because I'm planning an itinerary for this couple and I need to know whether I can book this hotel because they've told me that they only want to stay in warm weather locations. So it's able to maintain context and coherence as it's calling the tool, gets the information back, and then moves on to the next step in the process. And then they've actually found a novel way, because it's running such long, complicated tasks, they found a way to find the appropriate time when to disregard stuff that's earlier on in the chain so that it can make room for new tasks that are coming into it. So I think the actual wording for it is, they include strategies for managing long context, like summarizing or discarding old information so that the model can keep running without running out of room. So overall, this is a massive leap, and there's some really novel innovations here. And my takeaways are, I think we're seeing something here, a trend that's going to emerge, which is, instead of these hulking great models, so we'll still develop them on our charge towards AGI, but actually a lot of businesses you'll now see the emergence of models being designed specifically for special use cases. So narrower models, smaller in size, but tuned for specific workloads and agentic workloads.
You were already seeing companies that were doing this. There's companies like Turing who will go into large multi-billion-dollar insurance companies and go, right, let's create a reinforcement learning environment for a claims processor in the context of an insurance company. And it will take an off-the-shelf model, but it will fine-tune it with that reinforcement learning environment for that task. Then it'll look at a different task inside the company. So again, I was literally listening to this podcast on the way over to collect Stephen tonight. It was on the 20VC podcast. So there's companies who are out there doing this for the Fortune 500, creating these very targeted, fine-tuned versions of off-the-shelf models that solve very specific tasks and know how to solve them better than an off-the-shelf model could, because they've had that course of reinforcement learning.
So two things. We were talking this briefly coming across. There's a potential then to move back to server-based, your own server-based model. You'll download this, you'll run it in your own proprietary system on premises, so the security issues all get...
Or you run it in your own cloud or whatever.
Or your own cloud.
So
there's no worry about data leaks or anything else. And then the cost, because actually you're going to talk about
So in terms of its performance, so the Special model was going toe-to-toe with Gemini 3.0 Pro and the benchmarks, and it was kicking ChatGPT 5.1's ass in most of the benchmarks. A much smaller model, open source, and wait for it, here's the punchline, 15 to 20 times less for token costs. Not 15 to 20%, 15 to 20x less to run.
This is why I'm becoming more and more bearish, not bullish, bearish on this build out that's currently happening. I think 26 locked in, we're going to rack tons of hardware on 26. I don't feel as confident that 27 and 28 will get saturated, because I actually think the most disruptive thing to the build out of AI is going to be good enough intelligence that's fine-tuned with reinforcement learning for your specific task, running locally in your data center or your cloud, and not dependent on the hyperscalers. Good enough intelligence, fine-tuned for specific company-specific tasks, could be massively disruptive to what we think is going to be a 10-year build-out of hardware that I'm starting to feel less confident about.
These are the type of models that are going to run these kind of back-end processes in enterprise, right? And it's going to run them absolutely fabulously at almost no cost. But by the way, it's already at the bleeding edge of the frontier in terms of performance as well. So it's not like a shit model. It's like at the absolute bleeding edge of the frontier.
You've also got to get an ROI, return on investment. And when the cost of tokens is plummeting so quickly, unless you've got a model that can generate income on something other than tokens, you're screwed, which again makes ChatGPT 100%. The most suspect of all of the big...
Vulnerable as all hell.
Well, you've got Hugging Face, you've got all these dynamic routers, and as developers are
Hugging Face is just a place to store open source models so people can download them. Hugging Face doesn't do anything.
It's on Hugging Face now, but you've got these dynamic routers
you still
like
need
open...
to download it and host it somewhere.
But you've got these things like open routers, so as developers start building out these workflows for enterprise, they can literally just toggle on the model that they want to run that, and there'll be such a cost advantage that it'll just make so much more sense to use a model like that instead of Gemini or ChatGPT et al.
And I wonder how far we can take this whole reinforcement learning thing, because the truth is, if you're an insurance company, and I keep going back to this example of claims processing, right? But it's one we can all understand, right? People want to submit an insurance claim, and it's largely a process-driven, step-driven thing that doesn't require an awful lot of thought. Why does the model need to know everything in the world about fucking dolphins in order to just solve the narrow task of... So I don't know. I'm almost feeling like, could you end up with these extremely lightweight models that don't know everything there is to know about dolphins and Irish dancing and fucking playing the flute, but know everything there is to know about stepped processes inside an insurance company? And that's their whole domain is that. And as a result, they're much smaller, they're easier to host, they're lightweight,
cheaper to run,
but they're domain specific, and they've got a reinforcement learning component for the very narrow task that they're trying to solve.
All these models, I mean, the actual process part is the simple part. What you're really looking at is the bit that discerns, is there liability or not? Is there actually a claim here or not? And that actually only needs to be smart enough to understand the 1 to 5% that is open to dispute to kick that out of the system back to the human. So actually, as long as it gets it right 95% of the time and knows the 5% that it doesn't know, that's all it needs to do.
You got to take your hat off to DeepSeek. Don't forget the DeepSeek moment back in February or March this year. They effectively invented chain of thought reasoning. That was the big breakthrough. That was the DeepSeek moment. It's like, holy shit. DeepSeek's just as good, if not better, than ChatGPT at the time. And it was like 20% of the cost or a 20th of the cost. They developed chain of thought reasoning. That was a kind of breakthrough capability. Everybody figured out what that is because, of course, the very nice people at DeepSeek wrote a fucking paper on it, published it to the whole world, and every other researcher took that and rolled it into their model. And they've had another few breakthroughs here. So it's a very small but obviously super high quality team who seem to be pushing the absolute frontier
and that
of
is
new techniques and new breakthroughs in this space. And so whatever the breakthroughs are in this isn't really important. All you need to know, the big takeaway here is all the good stuff will come out of that and show up in ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude.
Yeah, it'll all get stolen.
And all the other models within about 8 weeks.
The thing, and again, to be clear, DeepSeek is Chinese,
Yes.
basically. So what we're realizing now is, China is no longer, and it hasn't been for
They've
a
never
while
actually
now.
been. It was only a kind of
this
Western
narrative that China just produces.
China's behind. China's 10
China
generations.
produces, China produces shit that's 1 or 2 generations behind, but don't worry, it's cheap. No, China's producing some of the best models on planet Earth that are also cheap.
Yeah.
And arguably are eroding the American models because they're undercutting the pricing model all the time. So it'll be very interesting to see how the still superior in many ways American models will be able to financially exist in a world where things like DeepSeek bring the cost down to close to zero.
100%.
Just checking artificial analysis to see if they've added DeepSeek to their intelligence index. No, nothing yet. But they will within a couple of hours, I'm sure.
Well,
So there you go. So amazing for running company-specific, industry-specific workflows, but might not ace some, obscure trivia question. I'll take it.
ultimately, it only has to work.
Yep.
Shall we?
So that's it.
Stephen, bring us home.
So I was thinking back to obviously the budget this year, which is a budget in the UK. Lots of well-meaning headlines. I mean, a lot of the headlines I don't disagree with. A lot of the practicality of it need a bit of examination. So the first thing that kind of came to me was this talk of £150 back to all UK energy users next year by way of a reduction in their power costs. So that got me to thinking, where's that money coming from? Like, is power getting cheaper? So it's not. First of all, where is that money coming from? Basically, we were getting cold energy supplements. So basically, the government was allowing power providers to give back to users a subsidy to insulate or put better heating into their house. They're removing that subsidy. So that's freeing up money from the power users. So basically, the cost is reducing. But the cost of those subsidies are going where? On the taxpayer. Right. So basically, that money is going from, everyone's getting £150 back off the electricity bill, but those of us working and paying tax are paying that instead of the electricity.
Right, okay.
So again, just a soft shoe shuffle from the government, and again, it's like all of these things. And it led me down the rabbit hole again of looking at where are we with our power. So if you remember a number of months back, we kind of had a chat about the problems with UK power. And to quickly remind everyone, the way that we pay power in the UK at the moment is at the most expensive part of the blend. So ultimately, there's a bidding system. Every hour, literally, all the power suppliers, wind, solar, nuclear, gas, all bid, and the government or the regulator picks the cheapest first, then the next, then the next, then the next. And of course, wind goes first, solar goes next, nuclear goes third. They're all the cheap sources. But that little bit at the end is usually made up by gas turbines. 98% of the time, that tiny bit at the top is gas turbines. That's the most expensive. But everyone gets to charge the gas turbine price. So all these lovely, we love to think, lovely green energy suppliers, they are getting multiples upon multiples of what they're charging. They're doing incredibly well. That should have been changed.
And am I right in saying, Stephen, that wholesale gas prices have actually came down?
They've come down, but it doesn't matter to us because wholesale gas prices are just one part of the mix of the gas turbine prices. Because you have to buy the gas, you have to run the station, and you're only running the station a few times a day or a week or a month to make up that bit at the top.
What's the why? But why do we have to pay the most expensive out of the blend?
Because that is the system that the government created initially to encourage the renewable energy. And they have tried to break the system, and they were scared that they might frighten off renewable energy.
So can I play it back to you to make sure I understand it? So 15, 20 years ago, before we had all this wind and solar, the government went out to all these guys and said, guys, put the investment in, lay down the capital, go and build all this infrastructure, produce this very cheap power, and your incentive for that is whatever the price of gas or whatever the price it costs to generate gas power, which will be many, many times, but we will pay you that rate, and that'll be what
that'll justify your return on investment.
Spend all the billions of dollars that's needed to build all this infrastructure.
And if I suppose to the same extent, if wind was the most expensive, we'd be paying at the wind power.
Right.
But whatever the most expensive, so we don't get a fair reflection of the actual cost.
And to make that real for us, Stephen, can you give us some kind of idea? What does it cost to produce a kilowatt of wind power versus, do we know roughly what the delta is between the cost of actual production plus the subsidy that the government gives?
I don't, and it is substantial, and I'm sure Paddy will throw up. Remember also that our cost of electricity is made up of the wholesale price, so basically the highest price, network charges. So again, we'll talk about that, but the infrastructure, all the grid is incredibly expensive. Environmental levies. So again, there are levies put on by the government to try and risk or to disincentivize use of carbon. The supplier operating costs, and I think we talked about, Octopus said recently, I think it was 1 or 2% of the cost is actually operator costs.
I never realised, by the way, so everybody listening, understand that of your 1,500 quid a year average UK electricity bill, Octopus, the guy who you think is making all the money, gets about 30 quid of that.
Oh, really?
A year?
Yeah. Over millions of users.
Yeah, tens of millions of users, but Octopus has to serve you as a customer for about 30 quid a year.
Wow.
So that's not where the money's going at all.
The other side of the coin is, so basically the government do set a price tariff, that you'll see that, and that does put an energy cap. So every quarter that's set. So we're not protected from ridiculous rises, but it is evened out. But it also has an agile cap as well. So basically we are overpaying for the majority of our power 98% of the time. So of course you're thinking, so markets surely must eventually sort that problem out. So is there an undersupply of power in the UK? So I went in a bit of a deeper dive into that. So roughly, total consumption is about 280 terawatt hours of electricity in the year. About 120 of that is domestic, about 90 to 100 is industrial, and about 60 to 65 is commercial or other consumption.
Yeah.
And the actual domestic generation is roughly the same, 280 to 290 terawatt hours. So we actually have a balanced supply. We actually produce enough power for most of our own needs. And in fact, theoretically, with all of the wind, solar that we have, the maximum capacity is something like 540 terawatt hours, almost double what we need. Okay. So if we could use all the power that we can create, actually we're in a power surplus. So we'd have thought, right, there must be a balancing coming out here, but guess what? No, it gets worse. It gets worse.
Yeah.
We're actually now paying 1.2 to 1.4 billion pounds a year to the renewable energy suppliers, not
To produce power.
Not to produce power
Yeah.
in case they burst the grid on times when we've got an oversupply.
So played back, if it's too windy, we're literally paying the wind providers to turn off some of the windmills because they're producing too much wind.
So we're subsidising them to produce. We're paying them at the gas prices when we need them, and we're paying them at a subsidised price just to turn the things
to
off.
turn the
So
fucking
they
thing
win both ways. Now, I am not anti-green.
Satanic.
So that is not
Yeah.
what this is all about. What I'm saying is we have a system that is designed to disincentivize anyone actually making it better. So what are the problems? The fixes are, one of the reasons why they can't use it is most of the wind power is in Scotland, and that's not just being produced in this room at the moment.
Yeah.
That's across the country. And the grid is not strong enough to actually move it. So that's why we're getting all these high tensile cabling put in to try and make the grid better. We're very lacking in battery capacity.
Yeah.
So you remember the stories a couple of years ago, maybe more now, when Elon Musk sent batteries across to Australia.
Australia, yeah.
We need that type of
Yeah.
thing now. And in fact, just
To buffer the power. So
to buffer the power.
Yeah.
create it, store it, and then use it when we need it.
Or
And when
stick-
the sun's not shining or the wind's not blowing, yeah.
stick a bloody gigafactory or a data center at Whitley's,
Yeah.
Yeah.
attach it up with a few
100%.
batteries and use the power at source.
Yeah.
So we have a problem with that. The other thing is we still have about 80 gigawatts of power. 80 gigawatts of renewable power online. I mean, so there's a lot more renewable power coming down the line. It's currently taking about 7 years. So there's a backlog. They can't get it built.
Just to get the grid connection and hook it up.
Can't get the grid connection, can't get the regulatory issues through.
Right.
And then same problem with nuclear. So we've
So
got
is that all
nuclear-
that not in my backyard? Don't want windmills, don't want...
all of that
Yeah.
stuff. Well, also you've got several different overlaps between Ofcom, local regulators, national regulators. It's a really messy. It literally does need someone to go in. With
So
a
when
big red pen.
Miliband comes on the news and goes, I'm sorry, the rate for electricity sit on the international markets, that's bullshit, basically.
I would actually like to clarify that's fucking bullshit.
Yeah.
There's no
Andrew Neil came out the other day and said there's been a 55% reduction in wholesale gas prices since, I think it was the war in Ukraine or something started, and we're still paying. And yet our gas prices have went up.
Well, remember, renewables give us about 50% of energy now.
Yeah.
About 50%. We've got about 16% nuclear. So again, we're only really pulling in the excess that we need from
Gas.
gas and from abroad when we need it. And if we had decent batteries or a decent grid system, we could actually be... So it's back to this whole idea. Government have said, we're going to give you a subsidy. We're going to give you some £170 back on your power bill. If we'd taken that money and just invested it in batteries and storage, we'd all be getting cheaper bills. It's that whole idea that they're not solving the problem.
But they're giving you in one hand and taking it back
Yeah,
off you in the other through taxation.
They're solving they're doing the usual, playing to a perceived problem rather than going to the root of it and getting to what needs
Is the
sorted.
move here, like you said, Stephen, like we've got the ability to create excess, right? If we really wanted to, we just don't have any, because we can't use it and we don't have anywhere to store it. We just say don't produce it in the first place. But we're capable of producing it, which is why if we put a fucking thumping great data center right next to Whitley's wind farm up by Andy, that would be the smartest thing we could do, right?
Well, you'd need to, again, have a regulator that came in. So one of the things that the British government currently does is it has got, I think starting next year, a special, and I can't remember what they call it, a mega tech something for industry. So steel and large commercial users of power will be getting a substantially cheaper rate. But it's not because they're getting a substantially cheaper rate. It's just because the government are subsidising that rate.
Right.
What we actually need to do is be able to say excess power can be given or sold at cost of production.
So who are the people in the chain? So we're reading here that it's like 27, 28 pence a kilowatt hour is the retail price of energy in the UK. If it's 4, 5, 6 pence a kilowatt hour, the raw cost of production, what are the other things in the middle that chew up?
So on a standard 26 to 28p kilowatt hour price, the wholesale energy is about 9 to 12p of that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Network costs are about 5 to 7p of that. Environmental and social policy costs are somewhere between 3 and 4 pence a kilowatt of that. And then you've got the operating costs from the actual energy companies themselves, which is about 4p. And then you got VAT.
At 5%.
But yeah, I'd love to know what the environmental and social policy costs are at 5 pence a kilowatt.
It takes someone to go in and look at it from first principles again and work out what we need to do. We're doing a lot of the right things.
The terrifying thing is there any solutions to this? Or is it just, like I say, she's cooking the books, right? You're getting the 150 back in one hand, but you're paying it out in the other hand. So it's like you say, it's a soft shoe shuffle. It's just...
I think there are fabulous solutions to it, but it takes thinking about what is the actual problem. And the actual problem is the way the system is billing and where that excess money is going to. So again, if we're paying that money, that's absolutely fine. But that excess profit should be reinvested to improve the grid and the battery. But we've done the hard work, as far as I can see, on renewables. We've done it.
Yeah.
You know, we're world leading in renewables. Fabulous. I love that. But now let's go to the next level, which was what we should have done first. We should have actually
The promise of
understood.
renewables was abundant, cheap energy, right? And it's not turned out to that. It's turned out to be unbelievably expensive energy.
Yeah.
Because no one thinks the problem through to the end, which is...
And they seem to have locked themselves into a bad agreement with the renewables companies that's not easy to unwind. Yeah.
So now we need to spend the money and invest in batteries. Scotland has got some fabulous battery storage facilities. We call them lochs. You pump the water up when it's cheap and you let it go back down.
Yeah.
It's a pretty inefficient use of power.
Yeah.
But, you know, there are lots. We've talked about it. We're seeing it with Chinese cars. I mean, some of the ranges coming out of cars now, some of the problems have resolved. So the technology is coming through. We just need to be as world leading in our battery innovation as we've been in our renewable innovation.
But we won't be.
No. And the great news...
Spoiler alert.
The great news with all of this is when you're the most expensive industrial energy prices in the world, you can look anywhere. You can shut your eyes and throw a dart and hit a country that's doing it better than you. And there'll be lots of lessons to be learned there, but that doesn't mean anything if you're not able to affect any change here at home. So...
And this podcast is about AI. If you think the UK can play any meaningful role in an AI future with the highest energy prices in Western Europe, you're absolutely fucking dreaming.
Understanding that tokens are an arbitrage on energy. Yeah.
But we are doing the right things. We just need to think the problem through. And that's the bit that's driving me mad. It's like, you know, we've got actually really cheap power. Let's use it.
Yeah. Woo!
There you go.
How
On
long was that?
Highly depressing bombshell. It's 57 minutes and 46
We're
seconds.
actually getting good at bringing these in on an hour. Well, Steve and I had to do the shameless begging last week, but you're here, and who knows how long you'll be here for. So initiate begging mode.
At least till next week, please, my Franken hand.
Think about Stephen's hand.
My claw is would love if you would like, share, subscribe. As we've said before, we don't do this for any reason other than we love getting together and chatting. And if you can share the love, we would love it. So thank you.
Like, subscribe, and share. Wise words.
Wherever
all right,
you
folks.
get your podcast.
There it is, episode 29.
9. Woo.
In the can.
Come on now.
All right, folks. We're back next week. Bye-bye.
Bye now.